Now let's move on, talk about Syria, where in the middle of November 16th, we had the EU announce new sanctions against Syrian ministers who had just put in place. Again, this is in the middle of a pandemic that we have the international community sanctioning countries. More recently, the U.S., in celebration of its Summit for Democracy, announced new sanctions against Syria for, chemical weapons attacks, which are absolutely false and bunk. If anybody is interested and wants to know more about the chemical weapons attack, by the way, Aaron Mate is writing up a great series. He's already through 2 parts of it. Check out his Substack or Gray Zone, or keep an eye on the viewpoints at antiwar.com. I'm sure we'll run it once he puts out the next part of that series. Of course, these sanctions are devastating the Syrian people who are struggling to get enough food and aid and fuel and everything as I believe winter is now approaching in Syria. Elizabeth Warren is calling for the Senate, I believe, Foreign Relations Committee to launch our Armed Services Committee. That is the Senate. Warren is calling for the Senate Armed Services Committee to investigate a 2019 airstrike we've talked about in the past on the show. 60 plus civilians dead in that strike. And while it would be great if the Senate launched an investigation, although the Senate Armed Service Committee is led by a former, military man, Jack Reed, and is heavily infested with military people, and so it's not like this will be the best place to get a fair investigation into what happened in Syria. However, that would be far better than what's going to happen, because it doesn't seem like an investigation is materializing there, but was materializing in the Pentagon. It's going to be headed by 4-star General Michael Etz Garrett. And I'm guessing this will be a lot like what we saw with the Kabul drone strike in Syria, where they're going to say, yeah, this was really terrible. A couple things could have been different, but generally we're, happy with how things went, and we're not going to change anything or hold anybody accountable. Just this past week, we had a drone strike in Syria, which the U.S., I believe, claims to have killed an al-Qaeda leader, but they also say that there was another vehicle in the region, and when the explosion hit the man on the motorbike, who I think the bomb, hit the man on the motorbike that I think they were targeting, and ended up hitting also this family of Sids who were driving nearby, and very seriously wounding one of the children. Lawmakers are asking the Biden administration where the hell it gets the authority to carry out these airstrikes. 60 representatives sent a letter, and this was headed by Jamal Bowman and Nancy Mace, which, this kind of thing should get a lot of attention. It should be really important, but my guess is that the White House is simply going to ignore it. The U.S., remember, is occupying all of Syria, south of the Turkish border, and then east of the Euphrates River. And the U.S. is occupying it and largely using the Kurdish group. It's either the like an offshoot of the PKK, the PD, or the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, I think is what they're most commonly known as, but you can see any of these groups. And for a long time, this group has been known to conscript young children in this region. The UN came down and started monitoring it. It got so bad and has actually found 160 cases of children being conscripted since 2018, and now there's actually protests outside of the UN building in Syria because of this conscription going on. They're saying that they're taking their daughters as young as 15, and that these are essentially kidnappings, that they're just ripping their kids away either when they're not home or when they are home, taking them away. And so in any other place of the world that, the U.S. didn't like, we would be saying, oh my God, child soldiers being scripted and forced into battle. We have to do something. Sanctions, punishments, bombings, all these things have to happen. Congress is passing laws. The president is making statements. The Secretary of Defense is saying that this is entirely unacceptable. If this was Iranian bat, this would absolutely be the worst thing happening in the world. But since it's happening to the U.S. bat allies, we continue to give the SDF money. Crazy. crazy going on. And this is in violation of U.S. law, by the way. You can't give weapons and money to groups that use child soldiers. But not only that, the U.S. is carrying out humanitarian missions along with the SDF. Why? I don't know. If you show up with the people who stole your daughter, even if they're going to operate on your son, you're probably not going to light those people very up. So I don't think this is the propaganda win that the Americans think it do, because, we had Barbara Starr, an official stenographer, write this up at CNN, stenographer. Sorry, butcher that one. But anyways, the fact that we're operating, in a humanitarian fashion with these forces that are conscripting children is absolutely insane. Last thing I'll mention in Syria is that Iraq took back 100 of the ISIS fighters that were held in the Syrian camp. I think there's still tens of thousands of people, not all of these fighters, many of them either the children or the wives of Islamic State fighters that are still held in these camps. Absolutely horrific conditions, talking about rampant sexual abuse, violence, lack of nutrition. Kids have been held there for years. This isn't like some kid was out of school for a year. We're talking about a 5-year-old who, is now 9-10 years old, who has lived in like a prison/refugee camp for the past, 4 years, and has had barely any class, and all the instruction is from, wives of ISIS fighters. This is the kind of insanity and horrific conditions that we have going on. And again, U.S. occupied Syria. ISIS taking those, or Iraq taking those ISIS fighters back, by the way, I'm not sure will go quite so well, even if they are innocent. Maybe they were conscripts. Maybe they had nothing to do with ISIS. They were just falsely accused or something like that. There's a lot of reports of them just being tortured to death in Iraqi prisons. And my guess is that's what's going to happen.